Bonus and half a day, the Committee of the Whole is in session. We are on Bill number 346-36. Materials for the Committee of the Whole are in the shared session Google Drive folder labeled 12-922 Committee of the Whole. Proposed amendments must be submitted in writing to the clerk via 36glsession@gmail.com. Amendments not in writing will be called out of order. We'll first begin with swearing in our panel. Sergeant at Arms.
Please stand and raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, do you all affirm that any and all information you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Madam Chair, under oath. You may proceed.
Thank you very much, Sergeant at Arms. We'll have our panel introduce themselves, please.
Paula Bloss, Government of Guam Retirement Fund Director.
Good morning. Edward Byrne, Director of Administration.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, we will have 2 rounds for questions for the panel. Each senator will be allotted 5 minutes in each round. That will not include responses. Time to speak may not be yielded from more than one member to another. A member who yields that member's time on a question yields all that member's time on that question and may not later speak, even if all the time yielded was not used. After the completion of questions, panelists will be excused, and we will have our 3rd round for amendments and comments on the bill. After we complete discussion of the bill, we will allow the sponsor to close, and we will entertain a motion for the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole, followed by a motion to rise from the Committee of the Whole, at which time we will report out the bill as recommended by the Committee of the Whole. So, Dios Masi colleagues, and now we will begin questions for the panel on Bill number 346-36LS, an act to amend Section 8502 and 8503 of Article 5, Chapter 8, Title 4 of the Guam Code Annotated relative to the Defined Benefit 1.75 retirement system. We will begin in the front row with Senator Duenas.
Cesar's Masi, Madam Chair, and want to thank you and the committee for allowing us this opportunity to get some additional information on Bill 346, and I want to thank the panel for arriving this morning to grace us with their presence and also to provide us with important information. Paula, I would go to you first. When we left off last week and decided to go to the Committee of the Whole, kind of the primary question was, of course, to get the statement from retirement on the record in this Committee of the Whole, but there was also entered into the record a statement from the retirement fund already. So I thought that I would start by asking you to elaborate, because it looks as though there may have been board concurrence on the statement provided for the record that was now is in the record on the committee report. So could I refer you to that as first and see your elaboration on that portion that was provided in the committee report as a position statement from the Guam Retirement Fund?
Thank you, Senator. Did you want me to go through the position statement, or?
I think that will be helpful because it may substantiate the question and may already, I'm sure my colleagues will have additional questions, but I think what we were trying to attempt to do is to get the veracity of that statement in its totality. Is that a blanket statement that basically says we are in agreement with the bill's proposal and don't believe that it would have a significant negative impact on the retirement fund? So I think I just want to see if that statement stands alone, and then I'm sure my colleagues will have additional questions along with that. But for my satisfaction of how I'm going to vote on this bill, is to see and ascertain the veracity of that statement in its whole as it stands in the record. So yes, I think that would be helpful, Paula.
Okay, so the position statement that was actually submitted on behalf of 346-36 was in support of the bill for the following items. It would actually provide uniformed personnel who are members of the DB 175 plan with lower age and length of service requirements for retirement with full unreduced benefits. It will also, if enacted, would increase the accrual rate for DB 175 members from the current 1.75% rate to 2.75% for years of service in excess of 25 years. The maximum benefit will remain at 85%. Bill 346-36 also, if enacted, would provide participants in the DC contribution retirement system with the opportunity during a designated transfer period to elect to participate in the DB 175 plan, which participation would become effective on January 1, 2024. The government of Guam was commissioned to do an actuarial cost study with regards to determine the financial impact on the government's unfunded liability and the government of Guam's employer contribution rate arising from changes to the law to allow new employees and active DC plan participants to transfer to the DB 175 plan. It also increased the accrual rate for DB 175 plan members from 1.75% to 2.75% for years of service in excess of 25 years. The maximum benefit would remain at 85%. It would also allow DB 175 plan members who are uniformed personnel to be eligible for the full retirement benefits at age 55 with 25 years of service or at age 57 with 5 years of service. The September 15, 2022 actuarial study commissioned by the Retirement Fund concluded that, subject to certain caveats and limitations described therein, the estimated cost to the government of Guam if Bill 346-36 is enacted would increase the government's unfunded actuarial accrued liability by 0.09% and increase the employer contribution rate by 0.04%. The Board of Trustees of the Retirement Fund supports the enactment of Bill 346-36 so long as the government of Guam's required funding levels to the retirement fund remain timely in light of actual increases to the employer contribution rate or to the unfunded actuarial accrued liability.
So I think that's a relative affirmative position. I think I got one more question. Trying not to speculate here, Paula, but just doing what is an annual, I'm sure, exercise of the GovGuam Retirement Fund. In the event that for some unforeseen reason, as you've discussed and looks like the board took very thoughtful consideration of this, there is opportunities to further avert any potential negative impacts by coming back to the table with the government of Guam in the looks like unlikely event that there would be any major negative effects as per your review. That could be corrected through negotiations and also employer-employee contributions. Is that correct? In the future, say for example.
In determining the contribution rate, the fund does take certain assumptions into consideration. Well, the actuary does, and one of them is, of course, the investment rate of return for the fund, the salary growth of the percentage of payroll, and then mortality and a couple of other factors. But like with anything, depending on the events that take place between now and in the future, that could have an effect. It could decrease the contribution rate, to the retirement fund, or it could increase it.
So, needless to say, it's generally, regardless of effects, a fluid situation.
That's correct.
Thank you, Paula. Mr. Byrne, thank you for being here today. I guess what I want to get from you is there may be a thought that that it's the government of Guam essentially that's bearing the full responsibility of this, but I heard during the public hearing on this bill that the employees as well, particularly in the affected employees here in uniform law enforcement, are not only willing to, but it's going to be a shared cost from them as well in terms of the contribution, should there be any requirements for additional contribution rates in terms of their contribution as well as the government of Guam's contribution towards their benefits. Would that be a correct statement?
Thank you. Good morning, Senator. Yes, that is indeed what the actuarial study assumed, that there would be a contribution from the relevant members.
Okay. I wanted to just close out with you, Mr. Byrne, that in my experience, and I wanted to see if my experience holds well, in my experience as a government manager in 3 separate entities of the government of Guam, it has often been the issue associated with fiscal management and managing any potential differences in the 12-month period of managing funds, that actually when individuals who retire, they carry the highest wage and benefit salary returns, and normally that puts the government of Guam as well as the agency in a stronger position because of the fact that recruiting replacements for those who have accumulated the maximum potential, most of them, of their capabilities in salary and benefits, it restarts the clock, if you will. I know that in agencies that I've been in, particularly in law enforcement, one retiring individual at full capacity is worth sometimes 2 to 2.5 warm bodies in that particular department. Would that be a favorable, correct statement as well?
Well, in general, your statement that that employees retire at a much higher level of salary than the replacement employees who are going to do their job, yes, that is true. Of course, you know, there's some intangibles there that you're losing experience, but fiscally that's so.
Yeah, you're correct on that. However, I think the concerns for this bill are fiscal in nature. I certainly agree with you wholeheartedly that you cannot replace experience, but I also believe that a cycle of bringing up, what we call succession planning should abide for that. So, Madam Chair, I asked those questions simply because I think that we're in a relatively strong position in terms of financial impacts, just in my initial blush. So thank you for allowing me to question the panel. Sijus Masi.
Sijus Masi, Senator Duenas. Senator Torres?
Mr. Byrne, if you will, can you just summarize your support in the DOA letter of this bill?
Yes, thank you, Senator. DOA, as the HR manager for the line agencies, most of which these employees are employed in the line agencies, is always concerned to make sure that we recruit and, in terms of pensions, much more importantly, retain the best employees for the government of Guam. A young employee may not necessarily consider pension benefits when they first join the government of Guam, but as they progress and hopefully stay with the government, they take a decision either to stay with the government or seek employment elsewhere, and retirement benefits will factor into that decision. The factors that they obviously consider are the current compensation, the future compensation, which is their retirement benefits, and other benefits that are available to government of Guam employees, such as the health insurance. So the intent of the bill is to try to make sure that we do retain these employees. Obviously, there's a little bit of contradiction in there because it does provide early retirement, but we want to make sure in the years leading up to that decision, we retain those employees and get the benefit of their experience in governmental matters and in particular in law enforcement.
Your letter discusses a funding opportunity by having these certain employees elect into the 1.75 plan and contribute at a rate that is higher than what they normally would. So I just wanted you to sort of allay any concerns that this bill will have negative impacts, when in fact the whole idea of this bill is that it not only fast tracks them towards an early retirement when their productivity is probably not aligned or as maximized as, say, someone much younger, just for law enforcement primarily. But I just want you to discuss that, because that seems to be the concern, and I think what this bill provides for is they not only have an earlier out, but their contribution is also accelerated. If you can just confirm that or explain that a little bit more.
Thank you. And if I may, I will also refer some of that question to the Director of the Retirement Fund. But let me start off by saying, the whole premise of this part of the bill is that the wear and tear on law enforcement employees generally is much higher and more severe than on those who don't have to be involved in law enforcement activities. And therefore, and I think there was some of the evidence given to the public hearing was that as you get older, I think this is probably true of everyone, but in particular of law enforcement, you're less and less able to recover from certain activities that take a certain amount of strength from you. So the proposal is to fund an early retirement option, right? Because it's an option, but there was also an alternative. And this is where I think I'd like Ms. Blas to respond. There was also an alternative in the actuarial plan for increasing the employee contribution rate.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Byrne. Ms. Blas?
Your question was pretty much the those in the DB 175 now that pay a 9.5% contribution rate. Any uniform personnel in the DC plan that desires to transfer to the DB 175 would also contribute at 9.5%. Is that? I didn't see. Yeah. So
There was a
in
mention
this-
of 10%.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
in the study, there were two options: to maintain the contribution rate right now at 9.5% for everyone, or increase it to 10% for everyone. Because carving out just the uniform, the actuary showed that the change for the savings, I believe, for that is so small. So they said, if you apply the 10% across the board to all employees, that's how you're able to realize the 0.04% 235,000 increase.
And that decision has to be made by whom? Who makes that decision? What base rate we apply? Has that been decided, or is that?
That's in the bill. The
Okay.
bill is actually, I believe, using 9.5%.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Senator Torres. Speaker Terlahi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to Mr. Byrne and Director Byrne and Director Blas. Could you just confirm then, so the bill at 9.5% is not the 10% recommended to get to the 0.04?
That's correct.
And is the retirement fund recommending that we use 10% instead?
We're not recommending which percentage to use. That's up to the body.
All right, so the Department of Administration had said in their testimony they want the actuaries to confirm that none of these actions extends the date currently forecast to be 2033 when the plan is expected to be fully funded. is that confirmed?
Right, we did not extend the amortization
Okay.
term.
So even with 9.5, it would not?
That's correct,
extend.
we
Oh,
didn't.
Okay, so you're satisfied, Mr. Byrne, with that?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
And then the DOA also recommended that the early retirement option be phased in to allow the proper planning. Is that in the bill? Phased in?
I don't believe so.
What would you mean by that? How would that work?
What was going through my mind, Madam Speaker, was if we, if the body passed the bill and it was enacted, and then everybody who was covered by the bill chose to opt for early retirement on the same day, that might be more than disruptive to the departments that's involved. So I was simply recommending that, and I'm not sure it necessarily needs to be included in the bill, but that the departments involved get fully involved and make sure that they can make sure that their operations can continue under these new circumstances.
Okay, for the operations then.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. GFD and, I'm sorry, GPD, I don't think they had any objections regarding impacts on their operations, is that right?
That I'm not sure if they actually indicated that as far as an impact on their operations.
Madam Chair, do you recall? I don't recall. Okay, so can you just clarify again? So the bill does several things. One is it allows uniformed personnel to retire earlier under the defined benefit 1.75 plan. It also extends the defined benefit 1.75 plan to new employees, and I think the bill is very specific about dates, and I just want to know, is there any employee then, we all had an option at one point, if you were in at a certain date, you had an option to switch over to the 1.75. Does this now cover everyone who, give this option to everybody or only to certain employees? And if you could be very clear about who gets that option now?
All DC current active employees that are still active on January 1, 2024 will have that option.
Okay, and for how long do they have to select?
The actual decision process is going to take place between July and December of next year.
Okay, and new employees, they have this option as well? The employees after that date?
After January 1, 2024, new employees will have the option.
Okay. There was one testimony suggesting that we mandate, or this be the default, as opposed to a selection. And I just want to make sure that, are you confident that the retirement fund or someone is advising employees the difference between the options so that they can effectively make a good choice when new employees?
If the bill is passed, then we would actually have that discussion with new employees as they come on board prior to making that. They'll have a 30-day window to make an option.
All right. And you believe they're fully informed of the ramifications of each option?
I believe the education that we did with DB 175 when we first rolled it out, and we went to every single agency, sometimes 2 or 3 times, depending on the number of employees. We did get a lot of questions from all the different employees. I thought that was very beneficial for the employee as well. So decisions that were made, I felt they made informed decisions.
Great. And the term uniformed personnel. So the Attorney General has suggested that we change the language and use law enforcement officers instead, or that we add at least a designated investigator at the Office of Attorney General in addition to uniformed personnel. But I guess I want to confirm, Mr. Byrne, Director Byrne, who are we excluding by not using the word law enforcement officer versus uniformed personnel?
But that evidence that was given at the public hearing was basically a presentation by the Office of the Attorney General to include certain employees not currently described in the law as law enforcement personnel, to include their investigative officers. That's, you know, I guess that's their decision and their request. And they're not part of the, the Office of the Attorney General runs their own affairs, so it wasn't part of a consideration by the Department of Administration as to whether they should or shouldn't be included.
Okay, no, that's not how I'm reading their testimony. They seem to say that investigators at the AG's office are included in the definition of law enforcement officers, but not included in the definition in this bill of uniformed personnel. Do you have a definition that you use for law enforcement officers and for uniformed personnel, and can you tell us the difference?
Okay, I understand. The law enforcement officer definition is in law, and basically it's for those that are covered by the Post Commission, but there's a list of additional people who are also included, and you know, because they're in different agencies. We've got some people in Parks and Recreation who are conservation officers. So all those are listed, unfortunately not in the same part of the codified law, but that's the definition that Department of Administration uses.
For law enforcement officers. And when you
Yes.
give, do you give certain benefits to law enforcement officers versus, do you use uniformed personnel for salary or hazardous pay or any other type of benefit? Should we use law enforcement officer, that word, versus uniformed personnel?
Yeah. Most recently, Madam Speaker, it was for those that were going to be included in the pay raise requirement. So that's where we most closely tried to define who are law enforcement officers.
Okay, great. What did you use at that time?
We used what was in the law.
As law enforcement officers?
Yes.
So you did not use the word uniformed personnel?
No, we didn't.
So if we change this term throughout the bill to read law enforcement officers, okay, what about the term Category 1 peace officers? So they said, amend the bill to replace all references to uniformed personnel with, quote, Category 1 peace officers, and that which the definition of which more accurately captures LEO positions. What about use of that term, Mr.?
Category 1 peace officers, if I remember correctly, are the people that are covered by the Post Commission.
That would be consistent with who is covered by the raises that were given to law enforcement personnel?
Yes, I mean, there were some other additions made to track those additional people, and and there's some others who think they should also have been or should be included in that requirement. But the answer to your question is basically yes. Right?
All right. And so would that, do you think, have a great impact on the fiscal analysis that has been done, or very minimal?
Most of the people are covered by that Category 1
already
category. And I don't have enough information to tell you whether there's a big difference or not, but I suspect not.
All right. So this was recommended at in the AG's testimony. I'm inclined to go with it if it's going to cover everyone the way they've been covered for raises and other things post, as you said, and if it won't have a great impact. Director Blas, do you think that would have a big change in the impacts that you've calculated?
The definition that we used in conducting the study was in accordance with the retirement funds definition of peace officers, and I believe that was, of course, it's in Article 1. I don't remember the actual section, but I know it was, it's in the definitions, and I think it's letter P. It has all the the different
Oh, then that-
positions in there.
That
Yeah.
sounds even better to me then,
Yeah,
if that was
yeah.
used. Okay, great.
And,
So
I believe we should use that. if
Okay.
Retirement fund is going to be the ones
yes. Could
retiring.
you just please highlight for us where that is, or
Okay.
so we can use that exact?
will.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Perry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to Director Byrne and Director Blas. This question is for Director Byrne. In one of your statements, you said that the costs, based on the assumptions, there could, in a change of assumptions, the cost can change quite considerably. Perhaps if you can, explain that a little bit more.
The cost that you're seeing in that actuarial report was basically a year-on-year cost. In any pension or future calculation that tries to calculate the present value of an obligation, there's always an opportunity for sensitivity analysis. When in our financial statements, for both the pension obligation and the OPEB obligation, there's a table that presents three different options for sensitivity. One using the current discount rate assumption, and one using a rate 1% higher, 1% lower. And that makes a considerable difference to the overall calculation. So it was just a flag to say that the assumptions in here are important, and without a sensitivity analysis, there may or may not be a big change to the eventual overall cost. Whether that impacts year on year depends upon a number of selection factors, like the number of people that do in fact choose to go into the 1.75 plan, or the number of people that do in fact choose early retirement because that's their option.
So this question's for Director Blas. Can you probably explain a little bit more of the assumptions that were made in this report, and if there was really a comparison between different sensitivity factors?
A comparison between the DB 175 and
Well, the question is, I guess, I'm just kind of tagging off what Director Byrne had said, that the cost can shift quite dramatically if assumptions don't meet whatever the study made. And so I guess one of the issues is, how many people is there going to be a mass exodus, right? A mass exodus of employees. Let's say all of them want to retire early. Can you explain if that was covered in the report, the varying degrees of retirement, early retirement?
the report actually covered the number of uniformed personnel currently active in the DB 175. It took into consideration a 30% assumption that those in the DC plan right now would migrate to the DB 175. And the reason they use 30% is a majority of those that were in the DC plan prior to January 1, 2018 already had an option. So majority of them would have probably already migrated over. It only specifically tried to capture those post January 1, 2018 to now. If the assumptions are higher than 30%, then it would actually help lower the contribution rate. If it ends up yielding lower than 30%, and 50% of new employees don't transfer, then it would increase the contribution rate. So any new employee coming in, if for that fiscal year, if it ends up being less than 50% moving over, of course it'll increase the contribution rate. If more than 50% of new employees choose DB 175 and the 30% of those currently in DC move, if more than 30% move, then it would lower.
Okay, you're talking about the contribution rate from the employee?
Mhm.
Okay, what about the?
No, from the government.
Oh, from the government.
The employees would be at 9.5.
Okay.
That stays.
Okay, so then we can adjust the contribution rate to mitigate any kind of impacts?
That's correct.
Okay. And so the impact could be pretty relatively stable, is that what you're saying? To the government?
Well, we actually, from year to year, we actually do a smoothing method. So one of the biggest factors in determining the contribution rate is the investment return. So that's smoothed over a 3-year period. So to keep the contribution rate kind of stable so that there's no major fluctuations for bad years or really good years.
Okay, that's helpful. What other assumptions could dramatically change the cost besides people that are switching plans or retiring early?
Mortality.
Okay, sorry to say. Okay, so then, but I guess my question is, do we have a handle on the impacts to government? Do you feel confident that we have a sure handle and we can, have the funds necessary?
I believe the way that it was actually conducted, the study was designed to provide an estimate with the data that we had at the time. And it was pretty conservative. So just from the first DB 175 that we actually rolled out, we assumed a conservative range for each of the age ranges, and we ended up realizing a much better position after everything actually took place. That's going to be the same thing here. We won't know what the actual costs are going to be until the actual implementation of the plan.
Okay. And is there any documents that you can share with my colleagues in regards to those comparisons? If there were comparisons that were done?
The report, did you get the actuarial report?
No, I didn't. Yeah. Is that available?
Yeah, that was provided to the
Okay.
committee.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, I'll have a look at it. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Perez. Senator Brown.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I certainly appreciate Paula from the Retirement Fund and Mr. Burns for being here. We did raise questions at the public hearing because retirement was not present, and certainly anything that impacts the retirement fund is something certainly we want to get feedback. Unfortunately, because we asked questions, we were, I guess, stigmatized in the election that we were anti-law enforcement, which I think could be further from the truth. But because of the history with the retirement fund and in the past, the government of Guam has not always been a consistent contributor. I think it's important that we know what the status is. And so I wanted to ask you, to begin with, in terms of the government contribution, is the government current with its employee contribution to the fund?
What's the current contribution?
No, is the government consistent and current with regards to its payments on behalf of the employees to the fund?
Yes, they have been.
Which is good news. A number of years ago, Paula, you recall, it was not the best of financial times for the government of Guam, and we were in a situation where we were going to have to address layoffs of employees. A policy decision was made in our legislature at the time that we would have an early out. And the same thing, it was an early 5-year buyout for employees that were towards the end of their careers to allow the opportunity for the new employees, the new families coming in that they were supporting, to not be adversely impacted to the degree where we would literally be putting people out on the street without any options. And so we made the decision to do the early out, and it certainly did have a significant impact on the retirement fund, and we're certainly aware of that. But policy-wise at the time, we felt it was important to minimize the adverse impact to the community. And so certainly we've been down this road before, but I wanted to make sure moving forward now And certainly I'm appreciative of the information that you're providing in terms of the percentage. But can you translate that into dollars and cents so myself and everyone else out there can understand what exactly is the dollar amount impact? It's obviously going to increase the government's contribution. So what are we talking about with regards to that increase if you look at those individuals that currently fall under the identification of law enforcement that could participate in this early retirement program? About how much money are we actually talking about on an annual basis?
Well, actually, the study took all the 3 different proposals in combination so that we could actually come up with an actual cost. Because if you just adopted one proposal, which was just the uniforms reduction, that would definitely increase the government's contribution rate by close to $2 million. If you took just the enhanced benefit, that would also increase the government's contribution rate by quite a bit. But by allowing to open up the DB 175 plan to allow for new employees or even current DC employees to opt for the DB 175, that had a positive effect, on the contribution rate. Because now employees are actually going to be contributing more at the 9.5%. Which now makes government contribute much less. With the DC plan, government contributes 6.2% for every employee. If a benefit for an individual equals, I'm going to say 14%, and an employee is contributing at 9.5%, government's share for the DB 175 would only be 5%.
For those also that are non-law enforcement that would be transferring over, what impact does that have on the years of service that they would have to serve in the government of Guam in order to be eligible to retire?
The years of service would be pretty much the service that they've had in DC, taking into account or consideration that there were no withdrawals, from their DC plan as they migrate over. When the DB 175 plan was implemented, actuarially, we determined what that percentage of their contributions for the employee share would move over to the DB 175. All of government share moves over, which now makes that individual whole in terms of the contribution rate for the government side. The actuary took into consideration that there may be some individuals with shorter service in DC migrating over that may not meet that actuarial rate. That's what you end up creating a small unfunded liability. But any new DB 175 members that come in, they don't create an unfunded. They're funded from the start.
So again, just to ask my question, how does that address the years of service they would provide, those that are non-uniform personnel? Because we're asking in this bill that those that are uniform personnel would work 25 years and be able to retire. What about those that are migrating over that are non-uniform personnel? How
no
much years of service
distributions?
would they on average have to?
So the DC plan was in effect since 1995. So
Yes.
1995 to 2022, 27 years
Yes.
now. Assuming no one took a distribution from their DC plan, they would have 27 years of service.
Yeah, I was there when we created that in 1995. With regards to law enforcement individuals that want to retire at 25 years, and let's say I'm a police officer at 24 years, what do I do at this point? How am I able to retire next year at 25 if this law passes? And I've not made these contributions at this rate. How would that affect me?
That was also an assumption that was made. You're going to have some that are going to retire at the get-go. DB 175 plan implemented in 2018 took that into consideration also. We assumed that a percentage of those that were already 60, 61 were going to retire within the next 5 years. We did the same thing with uniform.
Well, what would that impact be then? Because if I'm that police officer, I've served 24 years, I want to retire next year because this now allows me at 25 to retire, but I've not made the contribution at that level. what impact does that have? Am I still able to retire at 25? Is the government going to absorb the difference? I mean, where does that put me?
That's how it's worked. I mean, that's actuarially, that's how it's costed out. So you have assumptions of those that may not contribute long term, and then you have those that are going to be in the system for a
Right,
little
or maybe
longer.
if I'm starting out in my career, then I can,
Correct.
you know, I can build that up over time. So you're saying essentially that the retirement plan will absorb the difference that I've not contributed in my 24 years leading up, because this plan wasn't available for me to do, so I've been on the other plan, but I've had the years of service. I've served 24 years, this comes into place, and I want to retire next year on my 25th year.
You will be able to retire on your
And the plan
25th
will
year.
absorb the difference that I've not
Yeah,
contributed.
that's part of the cost.
Well, it's good to know that. Have you calculated what that would be, looking at the law enforcement officers with their years of service? How many individuals you may be looking at that I assume in order to make that determination, you've had an estimate of what those numbers could be. Do you know?
That offhand, I don't. But the actuary had that to do the assumptions of just the law enforcement.
Well, it would be good to know, because again, as long as you're not expecting an adverse impact, because certainly when we did the buyout on the 5 years, 20-something years ago, that certainly did have a significant impact on the retirement fund. One, it took a while to recover, so. But did they calculate estimating those in years of service that would qualify?
Yes, they did.
Okay, but you don't have that number
Right.
available. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll wait for the next round. Thank you very much for
Thank you very
responding
much,
to my
Senator
questions.
Brown. Thank you. Senator Titlegy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And good morning to Paula and of course, Mr. Byrne for being here. A lot of my colleagues asked a lot of the questions that I had, and it was very, very informative. Appreciate it. Paula, did you help write this legislation, your office?
We did.
Okay. So you're very familiar with the ins and out of it. So I'm going to take you to page, if you can explain to me, please, on page It's page 2 and 3, lines 25, and then in the next line over, 2 and 3. Can you explain the that section and line 25, legislature finds that the subject to the caveats and limitations in the actuary study estimates cost of government of Guam for enacting the amendment in this act should increase the unfunded actual accrued liability by 9.9 to increase employees' contribution rate by 4%. In a nutshell, this basically means that anybody going to the DB 175 would increase their contribution? Is that what that section means?
No, this is actually the combined cost to the government share, the contribution rate. The 0.09 is the increase to the accrued unfunded liability, and the 0.04% is the increase to the employer contribution rate.
Okay, and that, and a money amount you mentioned earlier is about $2 million, if I'm not mistaken?
No. For
Okay.
this particular bill,
Right.
the combination cost is at $230,000.
230,000 on the increase, right? On the increase is what
Yes.
you're saying. Okay. You know, when the bill was created, I was there supporting, the early out for those officers because of a prior bill that was introduced on the burnt out. And Mr. Byrne just mentioned something, it's kind of ironic. Here we are, we're providing incentives for those officers who can retire early, but if they stay longer than 25 years, it's going to go from 1.75 to 2.75. It's going to encourage them to stay. And we've known, it even was brought up earlier how, many of them are looking forward to retiring, and that's because of this burnt out situation with law enforcement. And so it's just, do you think that the actuary is going to take, you said 30%? You think that many of them are going to take the option? Was that the number of those who will take the option to stay longer and collect the 2.75 once they reach 25 years and then stay longer just so they can get that additional 2.75? What was the actuary on that?
Well, the actuary assumed that 30% of DC employees would actually move to the DB 175.
Would they stay past 25 years?
Well, if they stay at 25, past 25, then at 30, they would actually receive a benefit rate of 57.5% of the average of their three highest.
So it isn't a substantial increase, so it's kind of enticing them to stay on longer, right?
Yes.
So it's almost like if they do stay on longer, this amount would actually cover the cost of those coming in to the DB Plan 175, correct?
Yes, because all three proposals have to work in tandem with each other. You have new employees coming in to the plan, and those that are eligible to retire, retiring.
On page 3, line 7, when it says unreduced benefits, can you explain that?
That means anybody, uniform personnel at age 55 with 25 years of service could retire with 25 years of service without a reduction in their benefits.
Unreduced, that's what it means, okay. Page 4, line 14, up to 18, can you explain that?
Anyone who comes into the government starting January 1, 2024, will now have the option to either choose the DC plan or the DB 175 plan.
Is there more of a contribution in the DC plan than the DC plan than the DB 175? Is there more of an employee contribution?
There is. DC contributes 6.2%,
Right.
and DB 175 is 9.5%.
9.5.
Both plans are pre-taxed.
So you feel that there are going to be more people transferring over the DB 1.75, right? According to
For new employees at the time
new or current, just a combined.
We estimate about 30% from current DC.
Okay. What would be the reason why a DC, an employee who's on the DC plan would not want to transfer to a DB 175?
One reason could be GovGuam is not going to be a career for them. They're here for a short period of time, and then
Does it have to do with also the contributions on their end, and what they have to?
it could be, that's another factor, is the fact that they only have to contribute 6.2%.
Is that why there's 7,070 people on the DC plan, and there's only 1,200 on the, or 2,994 on the DB 175?
The DC plan is the only plan available since January 2018. So all new employees since that time could only go into DC.
Could only go into C, yeah, okay.
Yeah, at the time that the DB 175 was being implemented, about 40% transferred.
Okay. Can somebody actually be maintained because they've been on the DC plan for quite a bit of time? Also, contribute to DB 175 and still have the DC plan, split the two, because they can buy into the DB 175 and then still maintain the DC with their contributions?
No, you're a member of only one plan. So
Okay.
you either,
One or the other. You
One or the
can't
other.
split it up and keep some of their cash there that they've accumulated versus, and then going over to D. Okay, just wanted to make sure. What's my time? 25 seconds, okay. Okay, I'll wait for the second round. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Senator Titlegy. Senator Blas. Senator Terlahi.
Good morning, panel, Madam Chair. We're going for 3 rounds, right? And the 3 rounds would involve the amendments, right?
The third round will be for
The
comments
third
on
round will
amendments.
involve the amendments. Okay, so I
Correct.
yield my time until the third round.
All
Thank
right,
you very much.
thank you very much, Senator Terlahi. Senator San Agustin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A simple question, and maybe you already answered it, Ms. Blas and Mr. Byrne. This only applies to folks in the DB plan, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
This retirement program, that the bill, only applies to DB folks? Or does it apply to people on the other plan to join?
It applies to DB 175.
Everyone that's in that plan today can participate.
DB 175, anyone in that plan participates in this. DC members who are currently active will have the option to switch to DB 175.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. It's not just specifically for law enforcement uniform, it's everyone has an opportunity, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, the other question I have is, the actual report seemingly highlights that there is a fiscal impact only when you increase the number of employees enrolled in the hybrid plan, correct? I'll repeat it one more time. The actuary report seemingly highlights that there is a fiscal impact only when you increase the number of employees enrolled in the hybrid plan. Is that correct or no?
If you meet those assumptions,
Okay. Would there be any fiscal impact if the minimum age for the retirement under the DB 1.7 plan were lowered to 60 instead of 62?
no, there's nothing in here. We didn't take that into consideration.
Okay. Okay, so that would have to be dealt separately because this is very specific, correct? Okay.
Yes.
At least I understand that. We can make the amendment in a future bill after we ask you folks and DOA where they stand on that. All right, I have no further, I'll wait until the next round. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator San Agustin. Senator Rachel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify, earlier, Director Blas, I believe, correct me if I'm mistaken, the question was asked what the total cost would be to the government of Guam in terms of a dollar amount. Did you say it was $230,000?
Based on this combination study, the estimate is about $230,000.
So $230,000 annually is the estimated cost?
That's correct.
Thank you. Also, I just wanted to make a motion. There was a discussion earlier about the actuarial report. I thought it was on the committee report, but I don't see it here, so I'd like to make a motion to have the actuarial report appended to the committee report, and also if it can be loaded to our Google Drive for all the members to be able to review.
Thank you, Senator Rachel. On the motion to add the report to the committee report, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries.
Thank you. I have no further questions at this time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Rachel. That completes the first round of questions for the panel. We will begin the second round. Senator Duenas, you have 5 minutes.
I have no further questions, Madam Chair. I'm looking forward to the amendment round.
Thank you very much, Senator Torres.
No further questions, thank you.
Thank you. Speaker Terlahi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you just confirm, so the purpose of or the difference between joining a defined benefit 1.75 plan under this bill, it's the same benefit, it's the same calculation, it's just that we're opening it up again. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right, and did we do any analysis for different amounts of years here? I'm looking at section 6 of the bill where it actually lays out the 1.75% of average annual salary. Can we, if we changed this and added, this is a suggestion I received from someone else who knows more about these than I do for sure, but it's if we do 1.75 instead of 25 years, but for 20 years, and then a 2.25 for the next 5 years, and then the 2.75 for the next 5 years, what would be the effect on their retirement? In other words, if we increased these amounts for certain periods.
Just give me one moment. Let me just... You wanted to do a 1.75 for first 20 years, and then 2.5 for the next 20?
Or 2.25, but an increased amount, yeah.
That would still reach 85% maximum in 40 years, but that would change the cost.
How? Higher or lower for us?
It'll probably increase it because you're going to realize a higher percentage earlier.
Right.
In service.
So for the employees, they would be able to retire earlier with a higher percentage, is that correct?
Yes, that would increase the cost.
They'd be putting in more, and the government would also be putting in, or be liable for more earlier.
Well, there would be the option of 9.5% or the 10. The bill references 9.5, so if we kept the 9.5, it would be the government share that would go up.
Would go up. All right, but it would allow these employees to potentially retire earlier, right? Like all employees.
Right now, they can retire at 25 years with, you want
they'd
all employees.
they'd have greater investment at that point, right?
Okay, so your the benefit rate for everyone, that would definitely increase the government share, but I don't have that in a combination cost right now.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Did you do any other combination costs?
No, when we sent the proposal, the full proposal to I guess the oversight chair, we gave them different proposals or different options for each of the proposals and showed them what these individual costs would be. And if we combined how we could actually help reduce the government share by maintaining the 9.5 what employees are currently paying right now. Mm-hmm. And this is what we came up with.
Okay. All right. Is there any thing that the retirement fund has considered or to take advantage of the market fluctuations? For example, like if we increased our investment through collection of the, I don't know, more from the employees, would we be able to make a more significant investment in just because of the market fluctuations? Have they considered that? Is that something that they talk about or not?
I'm not sure what the question is.
Just the market has seemed to shift in the last few years, of course. But I'm just curious if there's anything that's been proposed or just discussed that might allow Guam to take advantage of that greater for our employees.
In terms of the investment statute that the fund actually has to adhere to, we are currently going through some revisions, proposed revisions that hopefully we'll be able to put before the legislature in the first quarter of next year, in order to be able to make some changes to the investment statute so that we could diversify a little bit more in terms of to be able to yield a higher rate. Yeah. So.
And yeah, what about collecting more from employees that during the time of low market?
That's actually something that we could look at in terms of, instead of the 9.5, to look at 10% contribution rate from them. Is that what you're asking?
Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah,
If we could show that this would have a greater return on our investment at this time, just because of market. But yeah, those are just
like right now, the two proposals or the two options in the combo proposal gives you a 9.5% contribution from employees and a 10 for everyone.
Okay.
And that ends up dropping the government share by 0.25%, which is a 1.4 million savings.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right, I have no further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Senator Paris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm looking at the actuary report that was provided, and maybe if you can just expound a little bit more on the assumptions. This is for Director Blas. So let me just read to you. It says the results developed using models that use standard actuarial techniques. And then it goes on to say future measurements may differ significantly from current measurements presented due to factors, so plan experience differing from that anticipated by the economic or demographic assumptions. So we could take them one by one. I don't know if you can see the report. It's on page 2. It says caveats and limitations of the study. So it's on the second to the last paragraph. If you can maybe go into detail more about what those factors are and explain how would that affect the impacts.
This actually makes reference to of course, the demographics of each of the members that are going to be moving over to the DB 175, as well as the investment return. You know, if the fund is able to realize the actuarial rate of 7% every year, that by meeting those assumptions, then we should be pretty much on target with what the combination proposal is showing us. If we don't meet those assumptions, that could drive the contribution rate, whether up or down, depending on the changes. That's why they're estimates based on data at a specific time.
Okay. Can you provide a worksheet that just shows the examples of that? So
I don't have the worksheets. The actuaries are the ones that actually put that together.
Okay, as far as though a listing of what was expected of those that were shifting over to the plan, and then, was there scenarios in regards to return on investment? Is that available for us to look at?
Yeah, they assume a 7% return
Mhm.
on investment. The actual shifting over, you mean in terms of the demographics of
Yes.
who would shift over?
Yeah,
I don't have that with me.
okay. Is that something that you can provide?
I can ask the actuary.
Okay, thank you. I guess the other thing, did they talk about the outlook of economic indicators in regards to plans, retirement plans? Has it been pretty on target as far as return on investments? So is 7% during this climate of inflation, right? Is this something, or recession for that matter? Was that taken into account?
That's all taken into account, and that's also very conditional based on the asset allocation that the fund has, or each plan has. Right now, the investment statute restricts, the fund to, traditionally it's 60-40 in terms of 60% in stocks, 40% in bonds. But because of those limitations, those caps, it makes it very difficult for us to be able to move away from what our limitations are. I mean, in the current market environment, we would have loved to put more into stocks, but
Okay.
couldn't.
All right, thanks, Paula. And then I guess another question. So I know the old plan, everybody looks to it, longingly. And do you recall why the government shifted away from that?
Back in 1995, from my recollection, that was the time market returns were double digits. I mean, it was a good time for them to create the 401 defined contribution plan. But that was with the caveat that eventually they were going to add on a Social Security component to it, and that never came about. The unfunded at the time was increasing, and a lot of it had to do with benefits that were being offered to employees or mandated that were not fully funded. The fund was not being actuarially funded. But since 2010, latter part of 2009, the fund has actually been actuarially funded.
Okay. Yeah, so because we hear about different jurisdictions where there's insolvency because they can't fund the retirement anymore. And so are there enough checks in place to ensure that the retirement fund is funded at this point?
Yes. As a matter of fact, in the past, the valuation was done every 2 years, which didn't give us enough time to really kind of catch up. Now it's been done annually for the last 20 years. So it makes it a little easier to kind of catch things much sooner.
And then how do you make the adjustments if?
It gets applied the following fiscal year.
Mhm.
It's always a 1-year lag.
Director Bird, did you wanted to expound on that?
Well, I think you're looking for the protection. The retirement fund rate is included in the budget each year based upon the recommendation of the retirement fund to pick up the requirement to fully fund. And that at the moment, like I mentioned before, the goal is to fully fund the deficit that we've got in the retirement fund for the defined benefit plan by 2033. And my gaze is always on that, because it's one of the first questions that the rating agencies ask is, when will you expect to fully fund your retirement plan? And they regard that as a indicator of financial management solvency.
All right, appreciate the responses and answers. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to ask, as we were talking earlier, you could be 25 years of service and at the age of 55, or you could be 57 and retire with 5 years of service. And I just wanted to clarify in terms of what those percentages would be. How much, just to make sure we're concurrent, how much would the percentage be if I were to retire at 5 years at 57? Is it this 8.5% and then it continues to go down the list here? Like at 10 years, you get 17.5. Does that relate to this particular defined benefit 1.75? Would that be the calculation?
As it relates to this bill?
Well, yeah, I mean, even for this bill, how would it relate to law enforcement? Would that be the case also?
Yes.
Okay.
8.75.
So if I had 25 years of service and I was 55 years of age, would it be that 43.75, or is it higher
Yes.
specifically for law
It would
enforcement? No,
be-
it would be at 43.75.
It would be 43.75.
So I would be taking home less versus serving another 5 years at 30 and getting 57.5% of my retirement.
If you stayed longer?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and under these newer plans, obviously, I mean, you almost have to work at 40 years to get what we used to get at 35. You know, everyone said
To
that
get
was
the
it 85%,
maximum,
right? In the old plan, if you worked to 35 years, you'd get 85%.
36.
Or 36, that's in the old,
Correct.
okay. All right, I just wanted to clarify, so this chart would be the concurrent year, percentage versus years of service then that we would reference. Okay.
And that's unreduced,
Okay.
so.
No, thank you, I appreciate it. Thanks for again, thanks for coming, because at least we have some assurances and a little more information that will allow us to make a better decision. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Chidley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Paula, has there been an consensus in our retirees, or not retirees, our employees that want the opportunity to switch to DB 175?
There's been quite a number of individuals that have inquired whether or not it was going to be reopened after it was closed.
Quite a
Back
bit,
in-
yeah. But then again, it would cost them more money to contribute into their plan if they do change from a DC to a DB 1.75, correct?
No. DB 175 plans are actually designed to be cheaper to GovGuam because
No, I'm talking about
employees.
the employees, not
Yeah,
not the
no.
government of Guam, but the employee.
Yes, it would be a little bit, it would be more for them.
So, considering, the state we're in right now, and if the economy doesn't get any better, I mean, everyone is counting all their pennies, even to a point where, I need to survive today, I need to be able to eat today and put my roof over my head. And so many of them are considering wherever they can cut. So if they stay at DC, they're only contributing how much? Not the government, how much are they contributing?
6.2.
And if they go to DB 1.75, they will now contribute
9.5 plus 1% to their 457.
Plus an additional
Yeah.
1.5, so it's almost.
That's their
10.
money, though.
Okay. And, I was looking at Title IV, Chapter 8, I believe it is. Under, it's Section 8119, under retirement. And I've noticed here in the Guam Code Annotated that with respect to members who joined the fund prior to October 1, 1981, and it goes down the list, and it actually has here where it allows, if he or she has completed 25 years of service or he or she retired. Well, let me go to Section A, because it mentions uniformed personnel. So this particular Section 8119 is talking about the old plan, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So what we're basically doing is allowing certain sections of the old plan to come into the DB 1.75, correct? Because here it says that the board approved that such members shall have attained at least 60 years of age or 55 years of age in the case of a member of a of the uniformed personnel, and it used uniformed personnel in the old plan, and shall have completed at least 10 years of total service. I think it's been stated earlier that we're going to try and change the verbiage from uniform to, law enforcement. But that's similar, correct? We're just not changing it, but we're using the old DB plan and incorporating this opportunity for uniformed personnel. Is that right?
Notwithstanding the old DB plan, the DB 175 plan will provide
For the uniform.
for uniform.
Yeah, so it's actually been done before in the old plan, correct?
Yes, those provisions don't apply to DB 175.
But now with this bill, it's going to, correct?
No.
So, but it says here that the old plan allowed them to retire at the age of 55. It doesn't say anything about 25 years of service, though.
Right. That age 55 was 8119, like you stated.
Yeah,
Those were hired pre-10-1-81.
right. The old plan, correct?
The old plan.
Right.
Anybody hired after 10-1-81 was age 60
Uh-huh.
for uniform.
Mhm.
And then anyone hired after September 3rd, 84 was also, I think, age 60.
It says, shall have attained at least 60 years of age or 55 years of age in the case of a member of a uniformed personnel, as shall have completed at least 10 years of total service.
Those apply to the old DB members.
Right, so basically, that's what we're doing. We're just taking that,
The similar type of a benefit,
yeah,
yeah, under the DB 175.
right, that was my question, there. Okay, it's just the impact, my concern about how much the government of Guam is going to have to fork out, but it's obvious that for retirement, there's more confidence in employees paying out their annuities or their payment than it is the government of Guam to provide their share. Because in the past, we've seen that some agencies, autonomous as well, have not paid into retirement, and that the confidence is more into the employee in paying their share because, of course, it's taken out of their check. So the DB 175 is an advantage to the retirement fund because of the share amount, but it is much more expensive for the employee than what's the DC plan. But last question is, how many months is that window of opportunity for the DC 175 for anybody to transfer? How many months is given for that?
It'll be from July to December of next year.
Was that the same amount of time that was given the last time it was open?
I think it's a little longer.
It is a little longer. Okay. Okay, well, thank you so much, and I really appreciate you coming down today. I wish we could have had you during the public hearing in that situation, but I wish you guys Merry Christmas,
Merry Christmas.
and to you and your family. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Senator Blas. Senator Terlahi.
Madam Chair, do I have to rephrase the amendment that I made? No? Yes? No?
No, we're not on the amendments yet, so in the third
No,
round.
I'm asking you, if I was going to make the amendment again, do I have to rephrase it again?
Senator Terlahi, in the third round, you can reproffer your amendment for the co-sponsorship and the one we were beginning to discuss. You can proffer that in the third round.
So I have to rephrase it again.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sorry, I thought he was asking, like, rephrase the actual amendment.
Senator St. Augustine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to, because the question's being asked about, and I think you answered it earlier from me. I just want to make sure that the people of Guam that are listening, GovGuam employees listening, that this bill catches all. Anybody that wants to participate when the bill is enacted in January 2024 or whenever you open the window, everyone can participate. And if you participate, if you're at the verge of even retiring, I think it was asked by one of my colleagues, you can qualify for the 85% or whatever the percentage is that's stated. Am I correct?
So you're saying, well, the only ones that really will be applicable to are the DC employees in terms of transferring.
That's correct.
Okay, all DB 175 current members this bill will be applicable to them. So those in DC will have the opportunity to move.
Right. But I just wanted to also make it clear that it's not about uniform or non-uniform, it's all GovGuam employees basically, correct?
All GovGuam employees, with the exception that the reduction of the unreduced benefits only apply to uniform, not the entire GovGuam.
In other words, everybody has to stay up to 62.
That's correct.
Versus in the uniform, they stay until the 25 and
25, 55, 25, 55 years of age, 25 years of service, 57 years of age with a minimum of 5.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Senator St. Augustine. Senator Rogel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question would be for the DOA Director, Mr. Byrne. Is there a possibility of the government of Guam saving some money on this? And what I'm getting at here is if this allows for older members of, the fire department or the Guam Police Department to retire or a little bit earlier. A lot of times those older members are a little higher in rank because they've been around for longer, so they've worked their way up in pay scale. So by retiring people with a higher pay scale, it takes them off the GovGuam's salary payments that GovGuam has to make. And then they're going to be replaced by, firefighter ones or police officer ones who start at a lower pay scale. So I know you guys probably haven't looked at all of that, and it's probably hard to calculate, but to me, that seems that there would be some room for some form of savings in that regard.
Yes, thank you, Senator. With regard to the operational budgets of the agencies in which these employees work, certainly if a employee with more years of service is replaced by an employee with fewer years of service and therefore fewer annual increments, there is a possibility that that some savings may accrue in the early years. That will, of course, catch up. And what we don't want to see, obviously, is the job of a senior person being done by a junior person, because the civil service, the whole structure requires people to do the jobs for which they're appointed to. But yes, there is certainly a possibility, and yes, we cannot calculate it not knowing what the actual outcome is going to be.
But just generally speaking, someone retires with a higher pay scale, replaced by someone at a lower pay scale. That creates savings in the operational budgets of the agency. And of course, I understand what you mean. You don't want everyone to retire and then you lose all of the institutional knowledge and all of the expertise that's required to keep the agency running. But I'm just speaking in general terms of having someone with a higher pay scale retiring, sort of being replaced by people with a lower pay scale. And so that should generate some savings. Like you said in the beginning, of course, they'll eventually catch up in pay scale once they do the required years of service to catch up in that pay scale. but then by the time they reach a certain age, they'll be eligible for retirement again as well, and sort of bring in the young guys after that.
Yes, that's the natural budget cycle.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, Madam Chair, I did have one more question. Is there a way we can get clarification on a listing of who would be eligible under this law? What class of people? I know that was discussed a little earlier. I think there's still a little bit of confusion. I believe Director Bloss mentioned that the retirement fund basis off your definition. Could you perhaps explain that further?
On page 2 of the bill, line 10,
So line 10 says uniformed personnel
as defined.
as defined in section 8104P, Title 4 of the Guam Code, annotated.
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Ridgell. I think Director Blas wanted to make one more comment.
I know that Senator Chalahi has an amendment to include the designated investigator at the Office of the Attorney General, and I thought that it would be more appropriate if they actually added it to 8104P definition, and maybe just another provision in the bill, as opposed to putting them in the middle of the whole plan.
I just wanted to, because there's some agencies that do have the ununiformed law enforcement, and I just wanted to add on along with the Attorney General's office. So would this bill include those agencies that do have, like the revenue and taxation, have law enforcement officers that are non-uniform? And I wanted to add that other agencies that do have non-uniform law enforcement.
Non-uniform?
Non-uniform, like the AG's office, the revenue and tax, and other agencies, if you will.
Is there a way to get who's included under 8104P? I don't have my law book with me.
We'll take a moment's recess. The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. We will take a recess now and excuse the panel, and then come back at 2 p.m. for the third round with amendments and comments. Thank you very much, Mr. Byrne, Director Byrne, and Director Blas for your time this morning, and Merry Christmas. We are in recess until 2 p.m.